you're a fiscal guy. Ben Bernanke has become a fiscal guy. David Stockman, of course, for years with the Reagan administration, he has been a bipartisan critic, particularly going after the vice presidential candidate from Janesville, Wisconsin, one P. Ryan. Why has the chairman of the Fed become your fiscal expert?
He isn't our fiscal expert. He's our fiscal enemy. We talked before about the side effects of this magical monetary mystery tour that we're on, which I don't believe in at all. Financial repression. The worst one is to tell the Congress in Capitol Hill that the cost of debt is free. And if you look at the curve this morning, you can borrow for 15 basis points for a year, 35, let's say, for 3 years, 60 or 70 for 5 years. When Congress sees that there is no cost to kicking the can, deferring the issues, ducking the choices, they continue to borrow and argue we'll get to it down the road someday.
Here's the op-ed, Sarah. I know you want to jump in here. We've got so much going on. Here's David Stockman, the New York Times, going after that upstart young Ryan. Mr. Ryan's plan is devoid of credible math or hard policy choices. Governor Romney and Congressman Ryan have no plan to take on Wall Street, the Fed, the military-industrial complex, or Apple.
Or Apple.
Or the nation's fiscal calamity. There it is. Just empty sermon, Sarah.
So you're arguing that the Fed chairman is giving Congress a free lunch. The counter-argument would be that he has to do something because Congress is so dysfunctional and so paralyzed that they can't do anything for the economy.
Well, look, we cannot run this economy with 12 people on a monetary Politburo in the Eccles building trying to figure out a $15 trillion economy that is badly injured and impaired from the debt bubbles that we've had over and over for the last 2 decades. So I think they're lost. I think the idea that you can fiddle with interest rates that are down in the sub-basement and make any difference is so wrong. And as a result of that, we are way off track in this country. We need to be getting our own financial house in order and let the economy heal itself slowly, even if it means a period of subpar growth.
Why can't they find Stockman humility? There was a period in the 80s you got crushed.
Right.
And you went through it, and everybody stood up and moved forward.
Right.
Where did that humility go?
I think the humility disappeared when the hubris arose. The hubris on the Fed, modern monetary policy, the idea that we can sit there and gauge 180 dials on the economy and move things along exactly as they should be, based on fiddling with interest rates, this massive bond buying, yield curve, manipulation and so forth. That is hubris. That is wrong. They say they have a dual mandate and they have to do this. Congress made us do this. This is nuts. The dual mandate, you've read it, it is so vague that it doesn't demand that you have an 8% or 4% interest unemployment rate or anything else.
When you see the Republicans now in their look back to the 1980s, what does Governor Romney, what does Congressman Ryan, what did they get wrong about the Reagan years?
Well, basically, it's an imaginary golden era that didn't exist. All right. What they're saying today doesn't even begin to capture what we had to cope with. We had a massive inflation. We had a massive deflation when Volcker put the brakes on monetary policy. It caused a huge decline in the economy. All of this was going on while we were implementing the program. We then had large tax cuts, but they became too big. Reagan had to come back and raise taxes 4 or 5 or 6 times. Half of the tax cut that we initially made, 5% of GDP, was taken back in future years because it went too far. We couldn't cut spending. Defense got out of control. Budget deficits were created. Fiscal indiscipline became endemic. And that's really what came out of the 80s.
Here's a chart, and then I want to talk about Scoop Jackson and Barbara B. Conable. Here's a chart, folks, a long-term view, and this is Lawrence Kotlikoff at Boston University, David Walker, the former controller, with his great organization. That white line at the bottom is the deficit. 15 trillion, our economy. But if you take David Stockman, as you know, the net present value of all the liabilities out there, including Sara Eisen's pension and her 401k, it's a $70 billion number. That little red circle way, way up high. We are distant from that, aren't we? Is it a tipping point now?
Yeah, we're beyond a tipping point because the fiscal cliff is now so big that politically they can't cope with it. And especially the fact that you have two parties who have fundamental platforms that are fairy tales when it comes to addressing the real issues. Now, on that present liability, the heart of it is Medicare and Social Security, and the Ryan budget, and they're the conservative party, doesn't address either. There is no change in Social Security forever, as far as I can see, in the Ryan budget, and Medicare doesn't get there till 2023.
Okay, well, and you laid this out in your New York Times op-ed calling it a fairy tale budget, but what about the president's budget plan?
I think it's just as bad. I think it's just as bad. The president says that we can't touch Social Security. He's the defender of it in this campaign, that we're not going to change or tamper with Medicare in any way. But beyond that, he gets elected as a peace president, and he does nothing about the defense budget. It's bigger today than it was under Bush, the largest in history. Beyond that, he says we're going to keep all big government spending that's in place, but 98% of the public's going to get a tax cut. The Bush tax cut's only the top 2%.
What are Sara and I missing? This idea that on October something, the governor of Massachusetts or the president of the United States says, the first day I'm elected, I'm going to do a Simpson Bowles redux or a Rivlin Domenici. Why can't we do what you people did in the 80s and get Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan together?
Well, because I think the two parties are now so dug in. After 30 years of pretending that we didn't have to deal with the fiscal issues, they no longer know how to compromise.
Stop. Vin Weber knows how to do that. Look, Bob Woodward, here's the book, and we're going to have this in a bit. He wants the nostalgia you want. We want Scoop Jackson of Washington. We want Barbara B. Conable of Western New York. Where are those people?
Well, I think they're around, but I think the party apparatus in both parties has created such a religious catechism about the elements of the budget that it's impossible. I don't see how the Pelosi wing of the Democratic Party is ever going to tolerate the big means-testing reform that we need in Social Security and Medicare. Without that, we're not going to make any progress.
Well, Medicare is really the big issue here. What is your
Social Security, too. Social Security is $800 billion. There are 40 million people that need it, but there's 15 million people better off, affluent, other assets. You have to have a means test for both programs. That's $1 trillion for Medicare plus Social Security. That's the heart of the entitlements. And if we don't deal with those, we're not going to make any progress. The Republicans are punting, and the Democrats are
David,
dug
let me
in.
get a question.
And how much room is there really to cut defense spending?
Massive room to cut defense spending. We don't have any industrial enemies left in the world. We have some riffraff on the streets here and there, but we don't need an $800 billion national security and defense budget in a world where we don't have industrial enemies or we don't have...
Are you willing to pay more taxes?
Absolutely, and that's the last thing. There has to be tax increases, and neither party's telling the truth. Obama's saying 98% of the American public, no tax increase. Romney's saying 100% of the American public, no tax increase.
Every time you hear I need a drink, David Stockman, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it.